When a racist flight attendant humiliates a young black girl and kicks her off a plane, she thinks she's just doing her job, but her world shatters when the girl's father, the airline CEO, walks in. What happens next will leave the whole plane speechless. Watch till the end, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. The airport buzzed with life, a constant hum of rolling suitcases, distant announcements, and the low chatter of travelers rushing past. Maya adjusted the strap of her leather bag, feeling the soft weight against her shoulder. She paused for a moment, letting herself take it all in. This was her first time flying first class, a privilege she'd long admired but rarely allowed herself. The polished marble floors gleamed under the morning sun streaming through the massive windows. Planes parked and taxiing in the distance like metallic birds ready for flight. Maya's heart raced, a cocktail of excitement and nervousness. She smoothed the crease in her modest yet elegant dress, straightened her posture, and glanced around. Passengers bustled past her, some with children tugging at their hands, some with coffee in hand, all seemingly in a hurry to get to somewhere else. Maya drew a deep breath, trying to calm the flutters in her stomach. First-class boarding was supposed to be smooth, a moment to feel the quiet luxury of being seen and respected. Yet the butterflies in her stomach betrayed her nerves. She had always been aware of the world's judgments, not only of her appearance, but of the assumptions people made before they knew her. Her thoughts drifted to her father, Daniel, a man of poise and authority, CEO of one of the country's most successful airlines. Daniel had always carried himself with quiet confidence, never needing to demand respect because it came naturally to him. Maya admired him endlessly, both for his accomplishments and for the way he had raised her, instilling in her a sense of dignity, self-worth, and resilience. Yet, even with that upbringing, Maya knew that the lessons her father had taught her could only go so far. The world had its biases, and she was about to step into one of its arenas. As she moved closer to the boarding line, she noticed the subtle ways people reacted to her presence. A quick glance lingered too long, a small nod that felt patronizing, rather than polite, a whisper that stopped mid-sentence when she looked in their direction. Maya straightened her shoulders. She had learned long ago that she couldn't control how others perceived her, only how she carried herself, and carried herself she would. The line moved forward, the soft squeak of luggage wheels punctuating the quiet rhythm of her thoughts. She could feel the excitement in her chest, the anticipation of slipping into the smooth leather seat of first class, the chance to experience the world from a slightly higher vantage point. But there was also a nagging awareness, a whisper in her mind that told her to be prepared. Airports were not always kind places. People could be cruel without reason, assuming entitlement over her just because she looked different from what they expected. Her boarding pass was in her hand now, crisp and official. She presented it to the attendant at the gate with a polite smile. The machine beeped, confirming her ticket, and for a brief moment, Maya allowed herself relief. Perhaps it would be simple. Perhaps it would be just another flight, another journey. But then came the voice, sharp, cold, ridged with suspicion. "Excuse me, miss, are you sure you're in the right section?" Maya looked up, her smile faltering slightly. The woman in uniform had a rigid posture, her lips pressed tightly together, eyes narrowing as they scanned Maya from head to toe. There was a judgment there that Maya couldn't ignore, an air of assumption that made her stomach twist. "Yes, I'm in first class," Maya said carefully, keeping her voice steady. She held out her boarding pass once more. The sound of her own words was steady, calm, but her pulse betrayed the slightest tremor of unease. The attendant tilted her head, her eyes flicking over Maya again as if trying to find some invisible fault. "I'm going to need you to step aside while I verify this," she said, her tone clipped and final. Maya's chest tightened. She had experienced prejudice before, but the open scrutiny, in front of strangers, was something else entirely. She nodded politely, stepping to the side, holding her pass firmly, trying not to tremble as whispers began to ripple through the nearby passengers. Some stared openly, others pretended not to notice, yet their curiosity was palpable. A younger attendant, Nina, hovered nearby, glancing at Maya with a subtle mixture of sympathy and unease. She didn't intervene, but her eyes offered a quiet kind of support, a reminder that not everyone around her was blind to fairness. Maya's mind raced as she stood there. She thought of the countless times she had been underestimated. At school, at work, even in casual settings, small acts of prejudice that were always dismissed by others as trivial. But this felt larger, more immediate. Humiliation, in public, was a sharp and burning sensation. She gripped her bag tighter, reminding herself that she was more than the assumptions others had about her. The attendant's voice came again, louder this time, drawing even more attention. "Ma'am, please remain here. I'm going to call security." Maya's heart sank, the magnitude of the situation settling like a weight in her chest. She was alone in this moment, standing under the watchful eyes of strangers, feeling the sting of judgment, the unfairness of it all. Yet, amid the humiliation, a quiet flame of resolve grew inside her. She would not let this break her. She would endure with grace, no matter what came next. She glanced toward Nina once more, catching the young attendant's hesitant, almost guilty expression. It was a small comfort, a reminder that someone else recognized the injustice, even if they were powerless to stop it in that moment. As security arrived and the murmurs of the crowd grew louder, Maya held her head high. She did not know that, within the next few minutes, the entire scenario would take a dramatic turn. That the man who had taught her strength, her father Daniel, would appear, changing the course of this incident entirely. But for now, she stood alone, facing the world with dignity, unaware of the storm about to shift in her favor. The terminal was a blur of sound, movement, and anticipation. Passengers whispered, some recording on their phones, others merely watching in quiet judgment. The tension was palpable, electric in the air, as if the world itself were holding its breath. And Maya, at the center of it all, remained steady, the embodiment of calm courage in a moment that demanded exactly that. Maya took a deep breath as she stepped closer to the jet bridge. The metallic smell of the aircraft mixed with the faint scent of perfume and coffee drifting from the cabin, the soft clatter of luggage being loaded, and the distant hum of the engines created a low, constant vibration beneath her feet. She adjusted her bag once more, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, and tried to steady the nervous flutter in her stomach. The flight attendant from the gate, Karen, followed her onto the jet bridge, clipboard in hand. Her eyes, sharp and cold, flicked over Maya with that same scrutinizing intensity. She tapped the clipboard lightly against her palm, a subtle rhythm of impatience. "Your seat," Karen said, her tone tight, almost clipped as she waved Maya forward. "Row 3, first class, right this way." Maya nodded politely, moving slowly, deliberately, as if to show she belonged. She could feel Karen's gaze burning into her back, assessing, judging, and finding reasons to doubt her presence. The quiet hum of the aircraft seemed to magnify every small noise. The click of Maya's heels, the rustle of her bag, even her own breath. As Maya approached her seat, she noticed a few passengers casting curious glances her way. Some were polite, offering faint smiles. Others lingered longer, their expressions just a touch too sharp, too evaluative. It wasn't the first time she'd felt the sting of judgment, but the intensity of it here, in full view of strangers, made her pulse quicken. She focused on staying calm, reminding herself that dignity was hers to hold, no matter what anyone else thought. Karen moved in front of her suddenly, blocking the path with an authority that felt more like intimidation. "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass again," she said. Her eyes flicked down to Maya's hands, as if the small slip of paper could reveal some hidden truth. Maya held it out smoothly, her fingers steady despite the tension coiling in her chest. "Here," she said softly, "it's all correct." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. She murmured, tapping the clipboard, then looking up at Maya with a faint sneer. "Are you sure about that? I'll need to double-check with the system." The sound of the scanner beeped, and yet Karen's expression did not soften. Instead, it hardened, as if the confirmation were meaningless. She turned to Nina, who lingered a few steps back. "Call security," Karen whispered sharply, her voice low but urgent. "Something doesn't seem right here." Maya froze, the blood rushing in her ears. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Security? Here. For her, the absurdity and injustice of it sent a hot surge of anger mixed with humiliation through her chest. She glanced at the other passengers. Some were watching openly now, eyebrows raised, murmuring quietly to one another. Others looked away, pretending not to notice, their discomfort hidden behind polite indifference. Nina hesitated, her eyes flicking from Maya to Karen. A faint frown tugged at her brow. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, clearly uncomfortable. Yet she did nothing, letting the orders of the more senior flight attendant dictate the unfolding events. Maya's hands tightened. Around her bag strap, her mind raced, going through possible arguments, ways to defend herself, ways to avoid escalation. But every option seemed futile against the weight of Karen's authority and the judgment of strangers. She forced herself to take a slow, measured breath. Composed. Strong, she would not crumble here, no matter the humiliation. Karen's voice rose slightly, piercing the quiet of the cabin. "Miss, step aside, please. I'll handle this with security." Her tone carried a sharpness that made Maya's heart clench. Passengers shifted in their seats, some craning their necks to see what was happening, others discreetly pulling out their phones, recording the moment as it unfolded. Maya moved aside as instructed, keeping her posture straight, chin lifted, and eyes forward. She could feel the sting of every judgmental glance. Her pulse raced, yet there was a strange clarity in her mind. She had faced unfairness before. She would face it now. From the corner of her eye, she saw Nina give her a quick, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement of the wrong being done. That small gesture, brief as it was, gave Maya a flicker of hope. Not everyone here condoned Karen's behavior. Not everyone was blind to fairness. The murmurs in the cabin grew louder. Passengers whispered to each other, speculating, questioning, some even snapping photos discreetly. The tension in the air was thick, almost tangible, like a storm waiting to break. Maya's stomach churned with a mix of fear and indignation. How could something so simple, boarding a flight, have turned into a spectacle of judgment and suspicion? Karen's phone buzzed and she held it up as if to show Maya the authority she wielded. "Security will be here shortly. I suggest you remain calm and cooperate," she said, her eyes glinting with a mix of triumph and entitlement. Maya clenched her jaw, taking a step back. She reminded herself that she had faced prejudice her entire life. This, too, was a test of her patience and strength. She would not shout, she would not plead. She would not give Karen the satisfaction of seeing her break. The first security officer appeared, moving quickly toward the scene. Maya felt the weight of the cabin's attention press down on her. Passengers' whispers grew louder, some questioning, some shocked, some silently rooting for her. She felt small, exposed, but she also felt a quiet fire ignite within her. She had been underestimated before. She would not allow herself to be diminished in this moment. Karen stepped back slightly, smirking. "See, I'm doing my job. This is standard procedure." Her voice carried a smug satisfaction, as if she had won some invisible victory. Maya took another slow, controlled breath, her hands resting lightly on her bag. She was alone in this moment, yet she felt a strange sense of clarity. She knew the injustice of this was real, but she also knew that patience, composure, and dignity were her true weapons. She would endure this humiliation with her head held high, and somehow, she would see it through. Little did she know that in a matter of minutes, the course of events would change entirely. The man who had taught her strength, her father Daniel, would appear, and the power dynamic in the cabin would shift in ways that no one, not even Karen, could have anticipated. But for now, Maya stood alone, a calm presence in the center of a storm of prejudice and misunderstanding. The hum of the aircraft seemed louder now, almost oppressive, as the first security officer approached. Maya felt her pulse quicken, a tightness rising in her chest. The officer, a tall man with a neatly trimmed beard, gave a quick glance at Karen before turning his attention to her. "Ma'am," he said politely but firmly, "we need to step aside while we verify your ticket and identity." Maya's jaw tightened. She had shown her boarding pass 3 times already. Each time, it had been perfectly valid. She nodded silently, keeping her voice calm. "Of course," she said, trying to sound composed, even as a flush of humiliation spread across her cheeks. Karen watched closely, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "I told you," she whispered to Nina, as if it were some secret victory. "Standard procedure, just doing my job." Nina's frown deepened. She glanced at Maya, her eyes flickering with a hint of guilt. She didn't say anything, but her hesitation was visible, a subtle crack in the otherwise rigid authority of the cabin staff. As Maya followed the officer toward the jet bridge, whispers from passengers followed her like a shadow. Some shook their heads, others murmured quietly to companions. Phones were discreetly raised, capturing the moment. The eyes of strangers felt heavy, judging, curious, critical, and sympathetic all at once. The officer guided her to a small, slightly secluded area just outside the cabin, a makeshift verification point. Maya stood there, her hands folded lightly in front of her, trying not to tremble. She could hear Karen's voice from the plane, giving instructions, asserting control, enjoying the discomfort she had created. Maya's mind raced. She thought of her father, Daniel, though he was far away at the moment. What would he think if he saw her now? He had always taught her to carry herself with dignity, to rise above the pettiness of others. She straightened her shoulders, drawing in a slow, steady breath. She would not let Karen's prejudice define her. Not here. Not ever. The officer returned, holding a small device to scan her boarding pass again. "Everything seems fine," he said finally, his voice calm. "I'm not sure why there was a problem." Karen's sharp voice cut through the calm once more. "I had just wanted to ensure everything was in order, that's all." Her hands trembled slightly, betraying a nervousness she didn't want to admit. Maya's eyes met Nina's briefly. The younger attendant gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shrug. It was as if she were silently apologizing for not stepping in sooner, acknowledging the injustice without needing words. The first officer nodded at Maya. "You can reboard, ma'am, but please follow me back onto the plane." As they moved, the passengers' whispers grew louder. Some shifted in their seats to watch the unfolding scene. Maya noticed subtle expressions of surprise, curiosity, and even quiet admiration. It was strange to feel exposed and observed. Yet she remained calm, letting the dignity she carried in her posture speak for her. Just as she was about to step back onto the plane, the automatic doors at the boarding gate opened, and a man in a crisp suit appeared. His presence was immediately commanding, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. His hair was flecked with gray, his expression calm but alert. He scanned the scene quickly, eyes sharp, and then stopped as they landed on Maya. Standing with quiet composure amidst the tension, Daniel Bennett. The air seemed to shift around him, subtle but undeniable. Karen froze mid-step, her clipboard trembling in her hands. The smug confidence she had carried moments ago evaporated instantly, replaced by a flicker of panic. She recognized him immediately, though she tried to hide it behind a forced smile. "Dad." Maya's voice was soft, surprised, yet calm. Relief washed over her in a subtle wave. Daniel approached, his pace measured, his gaze unwavering. Passengers and crew alike noticed the subtle authority in his movements. The way the room seemed to quiet in response to his presence. "Maya," he said, his voice steady, calm, carrying both warmth and an unspoken command. "Are you all right?" Maya nodded, keeping her composure. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'm fine." Karen's lips pressed together, and she shuffled backward slightly, clutching her clipboard. I was just following procedure," she said nervously. Daniel's gaze swept over her, assessing, understanding. "Procedure," he repeated slowly, the word carrying a weight that silenced the air. "Sometimes, procedure is nothing more than prejudice in disguise." The passengers' whispers grew louder as the situation unfolded. Some pulled out their phones, recording the scene. The humiliation that Maya had endured moments ago seemed to tilt toward justice now. The room aware of the stark imbalance in power and perception, Nina shifted slightly, stepping closer to Maya, her hands folded respectfully. She caught Daniel's eyes, offering a quiet nod, a sign of acknowledgement that the injustice had been noted. Daniel extended his hand subtly, signaling the security officer to step back. "This young woman is under my protection," he said clearly, his authority unquestioned. "She has nothing to answer for, and her dignity will not be compromised further." Karen's face drained of color. The smugness that had fueled her actions vanished completely. She swallowed hard, realizing too late that the situation had completely shifted. Maya's chest rose and fell slowly, her composure intact. The fear and embarrassment she had felt moments ago still lingered, but it was tempered by the presence of her father, the quiet assurance that justice had arrived. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch grounding, protective. "Let's get you back to your seat," he said, his voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable authority that left no room for objection. As they walked back toward the plane, the passengers watched silently, some with curiosity, some with admiration, all aware of the reversal of power that had just occurred. Karen trailed behind, unsure where to look. Caught in the humiliation she had once imposed on another, and as the aircraft doors closed behind them, the tension that had gripped the cabin began to shift. The injustice of the moment was undeniable, but the arrival of Daniel Bennett ensured that the balance had been restored, and that Maya's quiet dignity would no longer be questioned. Karen froze completely as Daniel's gaze fell on her, sharp and unyielding. The confident smirk she had worn moments ago vanished, replaced by a flicker of panic that she tried unsuccessfully to mask. Her clipboard shook slightly in her hands as she glanced at Maya, standing just a step behind her father, calm yet visibly relieved. Daniel took a slow, deliberate step closer. His presence was authoritative, commanding attention without a word. The murmurs of passengers swelled, some craning their necks, some lifting phones discreetly, all sensing the shift in power. "Karen," Daniel said, his voice calm, precise, carrying the weight of authority and disappointment. "Can you explain to me why you thought it was acceptable to call security on my daughter?" Karen's throat tightened. She opened her mouth, hesitated, and closed it again. "I was following procedure," she stammered, her voice wavering. I was just procedure," Daniel interrupted, each word deliberate. "You humiliated her publicly, embarrassed a paying passenger, and assumed her presence here was illegitimate. You call that procedure?" His tone was quiet, but every syllable carried a weight that silenced even the whispers around them. Maya stood beside her father, her chin slightly lifted, her hands folded in front of her. She felt the tension ease slightly with Daniel's presence, yet she couldn't ignore the sting of what had just occurred. Still, she stayed composed, letting her father speak for her. She knew she had the strength to endure, but she didn't need to prove anything in this moment. Karen's lips pressed tightly together. She glanced at the surrounding passengers, whose eyes were now fixed on her with a mix of shock and quiet judgment. Some whispered softly to each other, capturing the scene on their phones. Her professional facade, once impenetrable, was now crumbling under the weight of exposure. "I didn't know," Karen said finally, her voice barely audible. "I thought you had the right to judge her," Daniel said calmly, stepping closer, his gaze unwavering. "To assume her identity, her intentions, her worth. Do you understand what you've done?" Karen swallowed, her hands curling around the edges of the clipboard as if it could anchor her in some semblance of authority. I didn't mean," Daniel shook his head slowly. "Intentions don't erase actions. You judged her by the color of her skin, by assumptions, and you humiliated someone who has done nothing to deserve it. This isn't just about procedure. This is about basic human decency." The passengers around them murmured again, but this time with subtle approval of Daniel's stance. A few nodded quietly, some whispered words of encouragement toward Maya, and even Nina, standing slightly to the side, felt a rush of relief. She had witnessed the injustice, and now justice had arrived. Daniel turned slightly to the cabin crew. "Please note, this incident will be reported immediately. Karen will face appropriate consequences for her actions. No further passengers should endure this kind of behavior." Karen's face drained of color. She tried to apologize, her voice cracking. I'm sorry," she whispered, but the apology felt small, hollow, inadequate against the weight of her actions. Daniel's eyes softened slightly as he glanced at Maya. "Maya, I am so proud of how you handled yourself." You stood with dignity when others tried to belittle you. That strength, that is what matters. Maya felt a warmth in her chest. A quiet surge of relief mingled with pride. Thank you, Dad, she said softly. Karen's posture collapsed slightly, the full impact of humiliation finally settling over her. The smug confidence she had carried moments ago was gone, replaced by the stark realization that she had misjudged not only a passenger, but the very authority she thought she commanded. Passengers whispered quietly to one another, some nodding in approval, others still watching in awe. The aircraft, once tense with judgment and suspicion, now hummed with a different energy, one of respect, quiet admiration, and the unmistakable shift of power back into the right hands. Nina stepped forward subtly, placing a comforting hand lightly on Maya's shoulder. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I should have done more. Maya shook her head gently. You did what you could, she said. The rest is on him. Her eyes flicked toward her father, who was now quietly ensuring the cabin returned to order. Daniel led Maya back to her seat, the authority in his stride, leaving no room for objection. Karen lingered behind, her hands trembling, face pale, finally realizing the magnitude of her mistake. The cabin, which had moments ago held tension and discomfort, now felt a sense of closure, the injustice corrected, and the message clear. Prejudice would not go unchallenged. Maya sank into her seat, the leather cool against her palms, her posture relaxed now that the immediate humiliation had passed. The cabin settled into a quiet rhythm once more, the engines humming softly in the background. Her gaze drifted to the window, watching planes take off and land. The world outside seemed vast, full of possibilities, yet she felt grounded. Strengthened by the ordeal she had endured and the dignity she had preserved, her father sat beside her briefly, offering a reassuring smile. You handled that better than I ever could have expected, he said. Never forget that strength comes from within, and the way others treat you is a reflection of them, not you. Maya nodded, the lesson sinking deep. She realized that while the humiliation had been painful, the moment had also revealed her resilience, the quiet support of allies, and the power of having someone who believed in her unwaveringly. Karen, now, escorted to the rear by a manager, left the cabin in near silence. Her authority and confidence had been stripped away, replaced by regret and the stark awareness of her own prejudice. The passengers returned to their seats, some whispering, some silently reflecting, and the plane prepared for takeoff once more. Maya exhaled slowly, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and lingering tension. She had endured injustice, faced scrutiny, and witnessed the full weight of prejudice, yet she had survived it with dignity. Supported by her father and the small but meaningful gestures of those around her, as the engines roared to life and the plane began to taxi down the runway, Maya looked out at the horizon, a quiet smile forming on her lips. She knew that life would continue to challenge her, but moments like this, moments of resilience, justice, and dignity would remind her of the strength she carried within. The cabin, once tense with judgment and suspicion, now carried a different energy. A subtle lesson had been imparted to everyone present. The world would judge actions, not assumptions. Dignity was not granted, it was carried, and justice, though sometimes delayed, had the power to restore balance in ways no one could ignore.